Steve Jobs, The Relentless Pursuit of Excellence. Part 1, The Man Who Refused Good Enough. Why do some people change an entire industry, while others spend their lives simply following it? Why does one person see possibility, where everyone else sees limitation? Why are some products remembered for decades, while thousands of others disappear almost overnight? Most people believe the answer is intelligence. Others believe it is luck. Some say it is timing. But Steve Jobs believed something entirely different. He believed that excellence is a choice. Not once, but every single day. And that one decision can separate an ordinary life from an extraordinary one. Today, we're exploring the timeless philosophy of Steve Jobs. Not simply the founder of Apple, but one of the most influential innovators in modern history. His story is not merely about technology. It is about vision, creativity, courage, failure, persistence, and an almost relentless refusal to accept mediocrity. Because, in the end, Steve Jobs wasn't really selling computers. He was selling a different way of thinking. Chapter 1. The Courage to Think Differently. Long before Apple became one of the world's most valuable companies, it was simply two young men building computers inside a garage. No billion-dollar headquarters. No global reputation. No certainty that success would ever come. Just an idea. Steve Jobs believed that personal computers would one day become tools for ordinary people. At the time, many experts disagreed. Computers belonged in universities, large corporations, government laboratories, not inside homes, not on family desks, not in classrooms. Jobs saw a future almost nobody else could imagine. History repeatedly rewards people who see possibilities before everyone else. Vision always appears unrealistic until it becomes reality. Chapter 2. Simplicity is hard. Most people think adding more features creates a better product. Steve Jobs believed the opposite. He often asked one simple question: what can we remove? Removing unnecessary complexity requires enormous discipline. Anyone can make something complicated. Making something beautifully simple, that takes mastery. Look around your own life. The most memorable designs often appear effortless. A beautifully designed chair, a well-written book, a clean website, an elegant smartphone. Behind that simplicity are thousands of difficult decisions. Steve Jobs believed simplicity was not the absence of effort. It was a result of extraordinary effort. This philosophy extended beyond technology. A meaningful life often becomes simpler, not because life itself is simple, but because we learn what truly matters. Chapter 3. Excellence is invisible. Most customers never open a computer. They never see the inside. They never notice hidden components. Many companies would save money by making those unseen parts as cheaply as possible. Steve Jobs disagreed. He insisted that even the invisible parts should be built beautifully. Some employees questioned why. No customer will ever see it. Jobs replied with a simple principle: you will know. Character is revealed by what we choose to do when nobody is watching. Excellence begins long before applause. It begins with personal standards. The greatest craftsmen throughout history understood this. A master carpenter smooths the back of a cabinet that rests against a wall. A musician practices notes the audience will barely notice. A writer rewrites sentences readers may never remember individually. Why? Because excellence is never performed only for others. It becomes part of who you are. Chapter 4. Failure is not the end. Most people know Steve Jobs for creating Apple. Fewer people remember that he was once fired from the very company he helped build. Imagine that. The founder, removed from his own creation. For many people, that would have been the end. Years of bitterness, years of regret, years spent blaming others. Steve Jobs chose another path. He later described that painful experience as one of the best things that ever happened to him, because failure removed the weight of certainty. It forced him to become a beginner again. He founded new companies, continued creating, continued learning, continued imagining. Sometimes the greatest opportunities arrive disguised as devastating losses. History reminds us that many remarkable journeys include painful chapters. Failure is rarely the final page, unless we decide to stop writing. Closing reflection for part one. Steve Jobs once said that the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who usually do. But perhaps the deeper lesson is this. Changing the world rarely begins by changing the world. It begins by changing your own standards, your own habits, your own willingness to pursue excellence when nobody else expects it. Because extraordinary lives are rarely built through extraordinary moments alone. They are built through thousands of ordinary moments when someone quietly refuses to accept good enough. And in the next chapter, we'll discover why Steve Jobs believed focus was more valuable than talent, why saying no changed Apple forever, and why your greatest opportunities often appear only after eliminating hundreds of distractions. The next lesson may become the most important principle of his entire life. Steve Jobs, The Relentless Pursuit of Excellence. Part 2, Chapter 5, Focus is a Superpower. In a world filled with endless choices, Steve Jobs believed that the greatest competitive advantage was not doing more, it was doing less. That idea sounds almost backward. Most companies try to expand. More products, more features, more markets, more opportunities. Jobs believed that every yes carried a hidden cost. Every new project demanded time, attention, energy, resources. Eventually, too many good ideas became the enemy of one great idea. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company was struggling. Its product line had become confusing. Dozens of computers, countless models. Customers didn't know which one to buy. Even Apple employees were overwhelmed. Jobs walked into a meeting and drew a simple four-square chart on a whiteboard. Consumer, professional, desktop, portable. That was it. Instead of dozens of products, Apple would focus on only a handful. Many people thought he was crazy. How could making fewer products possibly save the company? But focus creates clarity. Clarity creates excellence. And excellence creates trust. The lesson reaches far beyond business. Our lives often become complicated for the same reason. Too many commitments. Too many distractions. Too many unfinished goals. Perhaps success is not about adding more. Perhaps it begins by courageously deciding what deserves our full attention. Chapter 6. Saying no. Steve Jobs once said that innovation is not about saying yes to 1,000 ideas. It is about saying no to 1,000 good ideas. That sentence reveals something powerful. Most people believe successful people have more opportunities. They do. But what separates extraordinary people is what they refuse. Every great achievement requires sacrifice. Every meaningful goal demands elimination. You cannot master everything. You cannot pursue every opportunity. You cannot live every possible life. The power lies in choosing. Every no creates space for a stronger yes. This principle applies everywhere. Relationships, business, health, learning, even happiness. The people who seem to accomplish the most are often those who have learned to protect their attention with remarkable discipline. Chapter 7. Creativity is connecting ideas. Many people imagine creativity as something mysterious, a rare gift given only to artists and inventors. Steve Jobs disagreed. He believed creativity came from connecting experiences that others failed to connect. Every book you read, every conversation you have, every place you visit, every mistake you make, every challenge you overcome, they all become pieces of a much larger puzzle. When those pieces finally connect, innovation appears. Jobs often explored subjects far outside technology: typography, calligraphy, music, architecture, history, design, Eastern philosophy. Most people would have considered these unrelated interests. Years later, they all influenced Apple's products. The beautiful fonts on the Macintosh, the elegant simplicity of the iPhone, the obsession with design. Nothing was wasted. Curiosity became innovation. Perhaps the greatest creators are not those who know the most. Perhaps they are simply the ones who remain curious the longest. Chapter 8. Don't build products. Build experiences. Steve Jobs understood something many companies still struggle to understand. People rarely fall in love with specifications. They fall in love with experiences. Most competitors advertise memory, processors, Technical features. Jobs asked a different question. How should people feel when they use this? That small shift changed everything. Opening an Apple box became an experience. Using an iPhone became intuitive. Walking into an Apple store felt different. Every detail mattered. The product was never just a product. It was a complete experience surrounding it. This idea applies beyond business. People may forget your words. They may forget your accomplishments. But they rarely forget how you made them feel. Experiences create memories. Memories create loyalty. Loyalty builds legacies. Closing reflection. As Apple slowly rebuilt itself, Steve Jobs wasn't chasing perfection for the sake of ego. He believed people deserved products made with care. He believed that details mattered, that focus mattered, that saying no mattered. He understood that excellence is rarely an accident. It is usually the result of thousands of intentional decisions that nobody else ever sees. And perhaps that is the lesson hidden beneath his remarkable career. The quality of your future is determined not only by what you choose to pursue, but by everything you choose to leave behind. Because every meaningful life is shaped as much by its no's as by its yes. In the next chapter, we'll explore why Steve Jobs believed staying hungry and staying foolish could transform an ordinary life into an extraordinary one, how failure became his greatest teacher, and why the courage to begin again may be the greatest advantage any of us will ever possess. Some people build companies. Some people build products. A very few people change how the world thinks. Steve Jobs, The Relentless Pursuit of Excellence. Part 3, Chapter 9, Stay Hungry, Stay Foolish. In 2005, Steve Jobs stood before a graduating class at Stanford University and shared 3 stories from his life. He didn't begin by talking about Apple. He didn't boast about becoming a billionaire. He didn't describe revolutionary products. Instead, he spoke about uncertainty, failure, loss, curiosity. And at the end of his speech, he left the graduates with a simple phrase that would echo around the world. Stay hungry. Stay foolish. At first glance, those words sound almost contradictory. Why would anyone want to remain foolish? Shouldn't wisdom replace foolishness as we grow older? Steve Jobs meant something different. To remain hungry is to never become satisfied with yesterday's success. To remain foolish is to never become so certain that you stop learning. The moment we believe we know everything, we stop growing. The greatest innovators often ask questions that seem naive. They challenge assumptions everyone else accepts. They are willing to look foolish in pursuit of something extraordinary. History has always rewarded those willing to question what others call impossible. Chapter 10, Connecting the Dots. One of the most powerful ideas Steve Jobs ever shared was this: you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. Think about your own life. Perhaps you experienced setbacks that made no sense at the time. A failed job interview, a business that didn't succeed, a relationship that ended, a difficult season filled with uncertainty. In those moments, it is easy to believe that life is moving in the wrong direction. But years later, those same experiences often become the very foundation of future success. Jobs understood this deeply. A college class in calligraphy eventually influenced the beautiful typography of the Macintosh. His dismissal from Apple eventually gave birth to new ideas, new companies, and ultimately brought him back stronger than before. Life rarely follows a straight line. It unfolds like a winding path through unfamiliar terrain. We understand its meaning only after we've walked it. The challenge is learning to trust the journey before the destination becomes visible. Chapter 11, The Courage to Begin Again. Being fired from Apple could have defined Steve Jobs forever. Instead, it refined him. Many people spend years protecting their reputation. Steve Jobs became more interested in protecting his purpose. There is an important difference. Reputation depends on what other people think. Purpose depends on what you continue doing. While others focus on his public failure, Jobs quietly returned to work. He founded Next. He purchased a small animation studio that would eventually become Pixar. At the time, few imagined Pixar would revolutionize animated filmmaking. Once again, Steve Jobs saw possibility long before the world did. Sometimes life closes one door, not because the journey is ending, but because a better road is waiting just beyond it. Chapter 12. Great teams build great things. Although Steve Jobs became famous as a visionary, he never built Apple alone. Behind every remarkable innovation stood talented engineers, designers, artists, programmers, marketers, manufacturing experts, thousands of people working toward one shared vision. Jobs believed that A players wanted to work with other A players. Excellence attracts excellence. Average standards eventually drive away exceptional talent. Great leaders understand that success is never about collecting followers. It is about creating an environment where extraordinary people can do extraordinary work together. The greatest companies are rarely built by one genius. They are built by teams inspired by a common purpose. That lesson applies far beyond business. Families, communities, schools, organizations. Every lasting achievement is built upon people choosing to trust one another. None of us succeeds entirely alone. Chapter 13. Don't compete on price. Compete on value. Many companies race toward becoming cheaper. Steve Jobs chose a different path. He focused on becoming better. Apple products were rarely the least expensive. Sometimes they cost significantly more. Critics questioned whether customers would continue paying those prices. But Jobs understood something fundamental. People willingly invest in quality when they believe it creates lasting value. The goal was never to build the cheapest computer. It was to build the best experience possible. That philosophy reaches into every profession, whether you're creating videos, writing books, building a business, or serving customers. Long-term success usually belongs to those who create value, not merely lower prices. Quality builds trust. Trust builds loyalty. Loyalty builds a legacy. Closing reflection. Steve Jobs often reminded people that time is limited. Because of that, every day becomes precious. Every decision matters. Every opportunity deserves careful attention. He refused to live according to someone else's expectations. Instead, he challenged himself to create work worthy of his limited time on Earth. Perhaps that is the deeper meaning behind his remarkable life. Your greatest competition is not another company, not another creator, not another entrepreneur. It is a temptation to settle for less than your own potential. Because the future rarely belongs to those who simply follow the crowd. It belongs to those who remain curious enough to imagine something better and courageous enough to build it. In the next chapter, we'll explore Steve Jobs' obsession with craftsmanship, why details became his secret advantage, how resilience carried him through unimaginable challenges, and why his greatest legacy extends far beyond the products he helped create. Legends eventually leave us. Their ideas never do. Until next time, keep learning from the legends. Many people can build a company. Very few can influence the way millions of people think about creativity, design, and excellence. Every legend leaves behind a philosophy, not just a biography. Steve Jobs, The Relentless Pursuit of Excellence. Part 4. Chapter 14. Obsession with the details. Most people notice the finished product. Very few notice the thousands of decisions that made it possible. Steve Jobs believed that details were never small. They were the product, the curve of a corner, the click of a button, the weight of a device in your hand, the sound a package made as it slowly opened. These things seemed insignificant on their own. Together, they created an experience people remembered. Many companies asked, "Will customers notice?" Steve Jobs asked a different question. "Will it be better?" That single question changed everything. True craftsmanship isn't about adding more. It's about refining, simplifying, and improving until nothing unnecessary remains. Whether you build software, write books, edit videos, or serve customers, people may not remember every detail, but they will remember how the final experience made them feel. Excellence is often hidden in the details no one talks about. Chapter 15. Innovation begins with empathy. People often describe Steve Jobs as a visionary. They imagined that he simply knew what the future would look like. The truth was more nuanced. He spent enormous time thinking about people, their frustrations, their habits, their hopes. Technology by itself meant very little to him. Technology only mattered if it improved someone's life. The greatest innovators don't begin with products. They begin with people. They ask questions. What is difficult? What is confusing? What wastes time? What brings joy? Every meaningful invention solves a meaningful problem. Innovation is not merely creating something new. It is making life a little better than it was yesterday. Chapter 16. Excellence is never finished. One reason Steve Jobs remained dissatisfied was simple. He believed every success could be improved. To some, this made him demanding. To others, inspiring. He celebrated achievements. But he never allowed yesterday's victory to become tomorrow's limitation. This mindset can be uncomfortable. When we accomplish something meaningful, our natural instinct is to relax. Steve Jobs appreciated milestones, but he never confused a milestone with a destination. Progress requires continuous refinement. A writer rewrites, an artist revises, an inventor prototypes, a musician practices. Mastery is not reaching perfection. It is refusing to stop improving. Chapter 17. The courage to protect your vision. Every creator eventually faces criticism. Some people will misunderstand your work. Others will doubt it. Some may even laugh at it. Steve Jobs experienced all of those reactions. Many of Apple's products were criticized when they were introduced. Some experts believed they would fail. History tells a different story. This doesn't mean criticism should be ignored. Constructive criticism helps us grow. But there is a difference between listening and surrendering your vision. The people who change industries are often those who remain open to learning while staying faithful to their deepest convictions. Balancing humility with confidence is one of the hardest skills any leader can develop. Chapter 18. Legacy is built one decision at a time. When people think about Steve Jobs today, they often think about the iPhone, the Macintosh, the iPod, the iPad, Pixar, Apple, but those accomplishments were not created in a single moment. They were built through countless daily decisions. One meeting, one conversation, one design revision, one difficult choice, one lesson learned from failure. Legacies are rarely built through extraordinary days alone. They are built through ordinary days lived with extraordinary intention. Each small decision shapes the next. Eventually, those decisions become a life, and that life becomes a legacy. Closing reflection. Steve Jobs challenged the world to think differently, not simply about technology, but about possibility. He believed ordinary people could create extraordinary things when they refused to accept mediocrity. He reminded us that simplicity requires discipline, that creativity grows from curiosity, that excellence is found in details, and that courage often begins with a single decision to believe in an idea before anyone else does. Perhaps his greatest lesson is not about building the next revolutionary product. It is about building a life that reflects your highest standards. Because in the end, the product we create may eventually become outdated. The companies we build may one day change. But the values we choose to live by can inspire generations. In the final chapter, we'll explore Steve Jobs' lasting legacy, the human lessons behind his remarkable journey, and why philosophy continues to influence entrepreneurs, creators, leaders, and dreamers around the world. Steve Jobs, the relentless pursuit of excellence. Part 5, the timeless legacy. Chapter 19, your most valuable resource. Steve Jobs often reminded people that life is finite. One day, every one of us will run out of time. That truth can feel uncomfortable. Yet, Jobs believed it was also liberating. When we remember that our time is limited, we begin asking better questions. Am I spending my life on work that matters? Am I creating something meaningful? Am I living according to my own values? Or simply following the expectations of others? Too often, we postpone our dreams. We wait for the perfect moment, the perfect opportunity, the perfect amount of confidence. But perfection rarely arrives. Life moves forward whether we are ready or not. Steve Jobs understood that action matters more than endless preparation. The greatest opportunities often belong to those who begin before they feel completely ready. Chapter 20. Innovation is a way of thinking. People often associate innovation with technology. New phones, new computers, new inventions. But Steve Jobs believed innovation begins much earlier. It begins with curiosity, with asking questions that others ignore, with refusing to accept that this is simply how things have always been. Innovation is not reserved for engineers. Teachers innovate, artists innovate, doctors innovate, parents innovate, entrepreneurs innovate. Anyone who finds a better way to solve a meaningful problem becomes an innovator. You don't need to change the entire world. Sometimes changing one person's life is enough. Chapter 21. Leave something worth remembering. Steve Jobs built remarkable products, but products alone do not explain why people still speak about him today. People remember him because he challenged conventional thinking. He encouraged others to believe that creativity and technology could work together. He reminded us that design is not decoration. It is communication. He believed that ordinary objects could become extraordinary through care, intention, and imagination. Every life leaves something behind. For some, it is a business. For others, it is a family, a book, a work of art, a company, a friendship, or simply the positive influence they had on the people around them. Legacy is not measured only by fame. It is measured by the difference we make while we are here. Chapter 22. The Timeless Lesson. Every legendary life teaches a different principle. Jesse Livermore taught us patience. Benjamin Graham taught us discipline. Warren Buffett taught us long-term thinking. Charlie Munger taught us wisdom. Peter Lynch taught us observation. John Templeton taught us courage. Jack Bogle taught us simplicity. Steve Jobs taught us something equally timeless. Excellence is a choice, not a destination, not an accident, not something reserved for a gifted few. A choice, the choice to care deeply, the choice to keep improving, the choice to remain curious, the choice to refuse good enough. Those choices, repeated day after day, become habits. Those habits become character, and character shapes a lifetime. Closing reflection. Steve Jobs once challenged us to think different. Perhaps those two words are even more relevant today than when he first spoke them. The world does not move forward because everyone agrees. It moves forward because someone is willing to ask a better question. Someone is willing to imagine a better solution. Someone is willing to take the first step, while others are still waiting. You may never build the next Apple. You may never design a product used by millions. But every one of us has the opportunity to build something meaningful. A career, a business, a family, a community, a life defined by integrity, creativity, and purpose. That is the deeper lesson Steve Jobs leaves behind. Not simply to create better products, but to become better creators, to live with intention, to pursue excellence with humility, and to remember that the greatest innovations often begin with one person deciding that ordinary is no longer enough. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life and philosophy of Steve Jobs. If you enjoyed this documentary, consider subscribing as we continue exploring the timeless wisdom of history's greatest investors, entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders. Because every legend leaves behind more than success. They leave behind a way of thinking. And sometimes, one timeless idea can inspire generations. Until next time, keep learning from the legends.